Thank you all very much for coming out for another introduction to the series of Data4God. I'd love to actually introduce you all to my guest this week, and that would be Bob Lentz. Bob, thank you so much for coming out and joining me today.
Sure thing. It's good to be here. It's always good to talk to you, Eric.
That's what people keep saying when I do these interviews, but at some point I'm not going to believe them anymore.
No, it's true. It's true.
So just to introduce the audience to you a little bit more, Bob. Bob has decades of experience in data and analytics, and I feel bad for saying that. I feel like I'm aging you there. But Bob has decades of experience in the data and analytics space across several industries, but primarily has been focused on healthcare. Currently, Bob serves as a director of UNC Health System, providing support to the data science platform, and Epic reporting and analytics teams. Bob's past roles have included manager, architect, analyst, developer. You have a degree in computer science from Thomas Edison State University and a leadership degree from, as I would pronounce it, Duquesne University. Your son and I have had arguments over how to pronounce that word. But you're currently enrolled in Georgia Tech's analytics degree program. Bob, again, thank you so much for being here.
Sure thing. First of all, true confession. What you don't see in my bio are some of the more interesting professional endeavors that I've had over the years.
Oh, okay.
And they truly bring happy memories, mostly. For example, newspaper delivery boy.
Oh, awesome.
Greeting card sales boy. Chicken puller. Gas station attendant, which I affectionately call petroleum transfer engineer. Kmart undercover security. Quick King food, beer, and gas clerk. Pool boy, rental car service attendant, and my all-time favorite, snowboard instructor. So,
okay. Now we are really going to have to talk. Snowboard instructor. That's what I'm talking about right there. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, let's just go carving, dude.
Well, all right. Let's one of those things. I'm horrible enough on skis. I figured that snowboarding would actually be better since it's just one thing. No, it's even harder. Like I've got two legs and one board, and it just makes it even harder. I figured it'd be easier than my legs going opposite directions.
It's harder to get started, but once there's a certain threshold you cross, and then you'll be okay. Which comes sooner than skiing. So if you just hang with it, you'll be good.
But does it come sooner than 10 feet? Because that's all I can make it, Bob. That's all I've got.
Yeah, we'll take you on the slope sometime, if we can find them here in North Carolina.
Touche. Well, perfect. Bob, it's one of those things. I love the introduction. I love the extra, pieces of all the different aspects of your career. That's awesome to be able to see. You come from a variety of backgrounds. But can you help the audience get to know sort of the other side of Bob? Can you tell me a little bit about your journey of faith?
Yeah, so I've been a Christian since I've been a small boy. I prayed with my parents, asked Jesus into my heart. I think it was following a church service, and it was in their bedroom one night. It was just really working. It was working on me. So since then, my early years and into my teens, I've pretty much rededicated my life to Christ until my rededicator was worn out. And, so that was a long period of time. It wasn't really until I discovered grace, really probably beginning in the 90s, but it's been particularly in recent years about discovering what it really means to have a relationship with Jesus and one that's grace-filled and not one where I have to work things up and prove things. And I'm learning more about it every day. Even now, just plumbing those depths. Just past couple days, been studying, hanging out with Psalm 23, just absorbing his love. And that's where I want to be.
Oh, that's awesome. You're exactly right. I remember early on in my journey, I had a very good head knowledge of Jesus and the Bible, but there wasn't a heart knowledge there, right? There was no relationship. It was, you could ask me any Bible question, and I was a good little student. I could tell you the answer, but it didn't mean I actually knew something. And so that's a different aspect. And like you said, it all comes with that relationship and that knowledge of grace. And I love the fact that none of us are done yet, right? And when we are done, he's going to call us home. So it's something,
Yeah, I think it's part of the problem. I think at some point I thought, well, I'll get to a certain point and then I'll have it all together. And then I'm realizing actually the inverse is true. The further you go along, the more you realize you don't know, and the more you need him. So maybe that's the point. I don't know.
Exactly. It's one of those things. I feel like I agree. The more I've grown in my faith, the more I've come to know how much of faith I need and how much more I have still to go.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
I had a boss at one point tell me that they aren't young enough to think they know everything anymore. And I feel I feel like it's that same idea, right? I'm not a young enough Christian to feel like I know everything anymore. The more mature I get, the more I realize I don't know. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
I
that's
think
so
it's the same.
true. That is so true.
So speaking of that, people get surprised when I tell them that I sort of work with data and math and numbers and that I'm a Christian. They sort of see those things as opposite. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't think I've ever had anyone question that.
Great.
But now, excluding myself, I've questioned it myself, but I haven't actually had someone come out and say that. So I guess I'm surprised myself.
Well, along those lines then. So, how do you sort of tie that in your own life? How do you sort of surprise yourself and sort of reconcile that idea of sort of, the what some would call sort of the engineering mind and the data
Mhm.
collection and gathering
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the faith?
Yeah, it's been a journey. So, the funny thing about these talks is that you can put things out there and you think it's like, oh, just like that. But then you realize you're talking about long periods of time of
Yeah.
wrestling, of searching and seeking. But like, I think for me, at some point, I turned this corner where I see God in everything.
Yeah.
Not in the the pantheistic perspective, but in His hand.
Yeah.
And and because I think like math and data underlie everything in science, and it just kind of feels to me like math and data are kind of the I don't know the artifacts of what we see of how God does things in the
Yeah.
natural. And there's probably some higher plane that God does in the supernatural that's much higher than we know.
Yeah.
And maybe it's kind of like how calculus is so much higher than kindergarten arithmetic, but He knows that we don't.
Yeah.
There's a lot of examples have just kind of jumped out in the Bible that make me ponder that sort of thing. Like sometimes I just kind of get in this like, well, just imagine, you'll laugh. Imagine the data behind God's numbering of every hair on our head.
Yeah.
And then I go like, well, gee, does He keep a history of the data, or is that just real time? And,
That's true.
and He keeps track, like He knows when every sparrow falls. Okay, how's He keeping track of that? But then even more pragmatically, like an awful lot of math went into building the ark. Lots of cubits and things, and building the tabernacle, building the temple. Joseph obviously had to do an awful lot of math and planning and data collection and, and planning those 7 years of plenty in order to then turn around and use math to figure out how to distribute everything during those 7 years of famine. And God absolutely used him to save Israel.
Yeah.
And so it just was, and oh, by the way, in the meantime, He made Pharaoh richer. So, like, there's just an awful lot there that I think we don't always give credence to. Or you're like Moses, and his father-in-law coming along. I think he was thinking about balanced decision trees or something. When he said, hey, there's a more efficient way to do this, guy. Instead of don't single thread everything, you need to multitask.
Yeah.
So I like Psalm 147. It says, He determines the number of stars and calls them each by name. So God was actually a data scientist way before any of us were. He had Adam labeling things, and so I think we look for it, we'll see it, and some of it is like God. When you seek, you will find. And so I think sometimes we have to do a little digging to realize that no, there's not a dichotomy between science and faith. There really isn't. It really comes back to what your perspective is and what perspective you want to bring to it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think it's that a notion, again, for a math reference, of conditional probabilities, right? Conditioned on the fact that God exists, we can see things in a completely different light than conditioned on anything else. And so along those lines, I love your analogy. It's God is a God of order at times, right? That when giving the directions for how Noah builds the ark, He's very specific on how big it needs to be. Noah doesn't know how many animals there truly are and how many are going to be brought. So he sits there and he's like, Noah, just build a big enough boat. It's like, you can't trust Noah for that kind of thing. It's something where it's like, no, this will be very specific, and this is exactly how you're going to build it and how you're going to pull this off. Same like you said for the tabernacle. No, these will be the specific count of things because this is exactly what I need it to be. And so God is a God that sort of has this order in this math because math adds a little bit of order to our universe. So I think it's, like you said, it all plays together. If God's in charge of all of it, then God is math. It's all there. It allows us to sort of see a little bit of the inner workings of how it all goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like, I think Romans, is it Romans? No, First Corinthians talks about we know in part and we prophesy in part,
Hmm.
and there's so much we know and see, and there's so much we don't, and so we have to trust what we don't see,
Yeah.
unless until God reveals it to us,
Yeah.
and which is all good. But I like sometimes to think that God actually has a random number generator because Proverbs 16:33 says the lot is cast into the lap, but every decision is from the Lord.
Yeah.
So I know some of these are kind of tongue in cheek, but when you really start to think about it and think about how life is put together,
Yeah.
it's like this was not an accident.
No.
We might not see it all, but it definitely was not an accident.
Exactly. Which, in all honesty, is all the more encouraging and all the more hopeful, right? Because
Hmm.
it wasn't an accident, that actually gives me a notion of hope. As
Yeah,
compared to if it was an accident, then what does my hope lie in? And so I think it's that notion of in seeing the likeliness or the lack thereof of us being here by chance and going, this isn't an accident. It actually that math allows me to have hope even more as compared to the less. So I
yeah.
agree.
There was a point in time where science used to scare me. I
Yeah.
can remember that. It's been a little bit of time, but I can remember being, oh my gosh, there's science over there and there's faith over here, and it took
Yeah.
some processing. I mean, God's not scared of our questions,
No.
and he wants us to come to Him. He says he constantly implores us to come to Him, and I think it was just I don't remember what the moment was, but it's like no, this every time I see something new in science, I just like immediately now God, that is so cool. I can't believe, wow, what a big, awesome God we have that He
Yeah.
did all this and He loves me. Wow.
Yeah.
So it can be a real worship experience, actually.
No, very true. Very true. I love that. That's a great analogy. That's a wonderful analogy. So you hear about all these great Christian organizations that are out there, and people can do wonderful work at these Christian organizations. But God calls us to work and be sort of His light and His lamp wherever we may be. So how do you connect sort of your faith to your career?
Yeah, yeah, that whole dynamic of He calls us to represent Him wherever we may be. That's really good. And it's really good stuff. I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Throughout my career, I've often thought, well, gee, the full time ministry versus whatever it is you and I do. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
you feel like it's a second hand, and somewhere along the line, I feel like I got a little bit of revelation around that. As far as there is no distinction; it's all worship, regardless of whether you're working full time or not. And I did have the privilege of, for a short period of time, working full time in the staff, working full time on staff at a church,
Oh,
so
awesome.
I know what that side of life is like,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's nothing. There's nothing holy there. That's it's the same on both sides, and so it
Exactly.
really does come down to a heart thing,
Hmm.
as well as
Yeah.
just seeking out what it is that God has for you,
Hmm.
and walking in the gifts that He has,
Hmm.
and trusting that He's going to use it. At one point in my career, I think when I finally kind of got a handle on that, there was two different company I was at. We started some Bible studies, work-based Bible studies at work, and there was so much good that came out of that. I mean, life-changing things for both myself and others. A lot of deep friendships formed. It was great, and it's funny because I haven't really thought of this. It's been probably 6 7 years since I was in that world. But
Yeah.
this conversation's kind of made me go, why aren't you doing it now? But I think sometimes there's seasons too.
Hmm.
I'm a little bit more of a season now, I think, of just uh, seeing where there's opportunities in
Hmm.
one-on-one relationships. I've had some opportunity to pray with folks at work
That's
about
all.
things, and they've been receptive to it. But yeah, the time period when we had those work-based Bible studies, that was really, really special. So God can move in so many different ways, whether or not you're in full-time ministry or you're in whatever the vocation is that God's called you to do.
No, that's awesome. I know you were sort of saying it tongue in cheek in the idea of you can be at a religious organization and still have the same struggles and same things in a real world. I mean,
Yeah.
it reminds me, right? I mean, the people who followed Jesus were simple fishermen, and then there were the Pharisees who opposed him, right? I mean, so you have the religious
Yeah. Oh,
organization versus
yeah.
non, and again, Jesus showed us you don't have to be quote unquote religious to be able to be believers. And so I think that has helped me along those lines, much like what you're describing, where it's like, hey, you don't actually have to work in ministry to do my work. And so
Yeah.
that's been encouraging. That's been encouraging. So you've sort of mentioned it, and you may not have had any direct struggles per se, but have you had any limitations in your career due to different focuses because of your faith, or has there been any notion of struggle in your career, or maybe a different perspective or different priority in your career because of faith?
That's also you always ask these really good questions, Barry. So,
It's like I try and prepare them ahead of time.
I think I haven't experienced any of the outward. Okay, again, I know people who have.
Yeah,
Where you're a Christian and and you basically get persecuted for your faith in the
yeah,
workplace. I've never had that happen. For me, my struggles have always been more to do. What am I actually doing here?
mm,
Like, what purpose am I serving here?
yeah,
And is this where God wants me to be? And then on the other side of that coin is just the okay. You just talk about people cutting off. I don't usually have trouble with people cutting me off in traffic. Cutting me off at work, in my workplace, and doing things that are a little bit sly, or
yeah,
just the competition that can tend to go on, or the frustration, and
yes.
that's when you just see how sanctified you really are, and God uses, at least for me, He uses the workplace as a crucible to pull out all the stuff that He wants to work on and help me through. So that's actually been probably more in recent years than ever before, probably, to kind of bring about His Son's life in me. And so for that, I'm grateful.
Awesome. Well, and that may be sort of the answer to my next question. What is a blessing that you've had? You sort of mentioned Bible study. Maybe that's it as well, that you've had in your career because you're a Christian. Name me one blessing that's sort of come from that.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind. Well, there's been so many. It's like, where do you start? Like, just God just showing up and giving you ideas about things
Yeah.
has been a blessing for sure. But one of the most poignant ones was when another believer at work, and we were part of this group, and I was struggling with my career,
Mm.
and he came alongside me, gave me some advice, and make a long story short, his advice changed the trajectory of what I was about to do. I
Oh.
almost made a really, really bad
Mm.
career choice, to the point where I woke up in the middle of the night at exactly 3 a.m., which is the same time another individual who was trying to establish this connection with me in career had woke up at the exact same time. And he was like praying, going, "Oh my gosh, we can't do this. We can't do this." And finally he had a peace about it and said, "Okay, I have a peace. I've given over to God." Well, that's when I woke up. And I'm wrestling
Oh.
with this,
Wow.
wrestling with this, wrestling with this. And long story short, we both realized this wasn't supposed to happen. And it goes back to the wisdom that old elder brother had given me and said, you really ought to spend some time with God. You just go to a park, write down what you're hearing about what is the criteria for what you're going to do next. And the thing that pivoted me when I woke up at 3 in the morning was I kept on feeling like the list. I'm like, what list? Well, the list that you put together that
Mm.
brother told you to put down. And I hadn't looked at it, even though
Oh.
I'd
Wow.
spent time with God. So I pulled it out, went down. Yeah, this new opportunity meets this, this, this. Oh, it doesn't meet that. Oh,
Yeah.
God, you gave me that to look at. And even though this opportunity looks so great and wonderful, it wasn't supposed to happen. So yeah, and it ended up going to a whole other company, which is where we had a whole other set of Bible studies and a whole other, like I ended up spending almost 16 years at this other place
Oh.
that I
Wow.
wasn't even interested in going in. I went in kicking and screaming, saying, "I don't want to go here, don't want to go here." Ended up there for 16 years. So you just never know how God orchestrates things. So that's probably one of the more profound blessings that I've had in my career, because of just the dynamic that faith has.
That's awesome. And I think it's great that God can actually show us looking back sometimes. He doesn't always reveal it, but he can show us looking back sometimes at his amazing hand and his work and things where we go, ah, I see what you did there. That one's on me. Good
Yeah,
call.
yeah,
I'm glad
yeah,
you did it. We don't always get those previews back, but when he does show us that, it's just so encouraging. Like you explained.
yeah, yeah. And he reuses. You get a lot of mileage out of it. I'll
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yes, very much so. Well, again, we're sort of wrapping it up here, but Bob, tell me some things that we can do to pray for you. In this sort of, we have people listening at home. What are some great things we can pray for you about?
Oh well, thank you. So I think the biggest thing is,
Mhm.
and I apologize that I'm not going to NC State's IAA program,
Okay,
but
I
they
forgive
don't
you.
have
I
a
forgive
part-time.
you.
I'm at least staying in the ACC at Georgia Tech, which that means that the Wolfpack will at least get another victory this year. So you can thank that. But
Here's
yeah,
hope.
exactly. But yeah, it's been hard going back to school.
Yeah.
I haven't done calculus in a long, long, long time. Into what? Integral.
Yes.
So it's just finding that balance. So I guess a prayer request would be just that God gives me the wisdom of like Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and how they learned the language and the literature of the Babylonians, and not that this is the Babylonians, but it's that
Yeah.
he provides me the supernatural ability to understand the learning, because it's something I feel I really want to do. I feel like his hands on me in it, so I want to keep at it. But as you know, going to school can be hard when you're working full time.
Yes, yes, it can, and it's something where the longer you're out of school, the harder it is to get back into those habits. Because those habits, man, there are different habits in the professional workforce than there are in a
Yes,
school setting, and it's
yes.
a whole different lifestyle. And you're exactly right. I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. I would be a horrible student right now. I really would be.
Your students watch this.
Yeah, I know. Shh, don't tell them. Perfect. Well, Bob, thank you so much again for coming out. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to be able to chat with you and to find out a little bit more. Hopefully, this has been able to inspire some people who are, again, wavering a little bit in their idea of how we can connect faith and data in their career. So, again, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to be with you and just to talk with you again.
Sure thing, sure thing. And thank you all for watching at home. It's been an absolute pleasure. Catch us next time as well. You all take care and God bless.